Let's understand the concept of promise with a very basic example. Then, we can move on to see a more complex example of its usage and understand how it's a better coding pattern than the callbacks. Imagine you have a ticket to a book fair happening in the future. This ticket comes with a special offer. If the book fair takes place, you get to attend and buy 3 books of your choice using the ticket money. It's a great deal because the book prices at the fair can be higher than the ticket price. If, unfortunately, the book fair gets cancelled due to bad weather, you'll get your money back. So, you don't lose anything. But here's the interesting part, after you purchase the ticket, you don't have to just wait around for the book fair to happen. You can go about your daily activities, and the book fair management team will work behind the scenes to make sure the book fair happens for you. When it's ready, they'll notify you, and you can go and enjoy the fair. That's how promises work in JavaScript. They're like your reliable friends when it comes to handling tasks in the background. They make a promise to do something, and you'll get a message when it's done, whether it's a success or a bump in the road. It keeps your code running smoothly without you having to sit and wait for things to happen. Let's see this in action in the code. So let's declare a promise here and let's see how it works. We have a promise object myPromise here. There are some other details that we have to fill in here, but for now, I'm just leaving them blank and trying to utilize this object first, so that we can understand how it works. There are 2 methods of this promise object. The first one is then, and the other one is catch. These methods take functions as an input. I'm passing arrow functions here. And let's just console something inside the arrow functions pass to then and catch. Let's see how we modify the arrow function passed to the constructor of the promise object and based on that modification, how the then method or the catch method will be called. This function takes 2 functions as parameters and traditionally, these methods are named as resolve and reject. If we call resolve function within the arrow function, it marks the promise as completed successfully, and the arrow method inside the then is executed as a result. And if we call reject function within the arrow function passed to the promise constructor, it marks the promise as completed but failed, and the arrow function inside the catch is executed as a result. To pass data to the then or catch, let's move forward and simply instead of calling resolve or reject immediately, and it is received after some delay using the arrow functions inside then and catch. If I run this code, I can see the detailed error object on the console. And if I want to see the error text only, I can use the message property of the error object. Similarly, to pass the data to the then, we can pass it to the resolve method and receive it as a parameter to the arrow functions of the then. We can also pass complex objects such as a JSON object. Here, I am passing the object with 2 properties, name and age. And I can use them in the then as required. Let's move forward and instead of calling resolve or reject immediately, we call them after some delay using the setTimeout function. Let's use 3 seconds as the delay and move the resolve method inside. As soon as the promise execution starts, we call setTimeout, which triggers resolve after 3 seconds. If we run the code now, we can see a 3 seconds delay before the JSON object is printed on the console. To make the code modular and cleaner, we can put the promise object inside a function. Let me create a function myPromise function and I just take my previous code and put it inside the function. And what I can do is I can return my promise from this function, or to make it more cleaner, instead of storing it in a constant, I can return it right from there. Now, instead of directly utilizing my promise, I can call my promise function and it will return me a promise object. And on the returned promise object, I will be hooking the then and catch methods. Let's now get to a little bit more complex example and try to read a file using the file system module of node.js. Here, I am importing the fs module using require. There is a variation of this module which actually works on the promises. But we will come to this later. First, let's use the callback-based file system module and understand the basics that will lead to utilization of the promise-based fs module. So let's come here and let's modify this code a little bit. So instead of calling a setTimeout function, we will read a file here, and when the file reading will be complete, we will resolve the promise right there. If we look at fs.readFile function, we can see that it returns a void, so we are not getting anything back. However, in its last parameter, it takes a function as a callback. And this callback will either return us an error or it will return us data. So let's pass the file path to the readFile function and an arrow function as a callback. Here we can make the use of the if-else statements. If there is file data, we will resolve the promise and send the file data as it is to the consumer of this promise. If there is an error, we reject this promise and send error to the consumer of this promise. Let's run this code and see the output. There is a file temp.txt in the same directory with some random text. If the file reading is successful, we should see the same text on the console. We can see the data, but it's not in the correct format. Let's pass UTF-8 encoding to the file read function and rerun the code. Now we can see the data in the readable format. Let's now pass an incorrect file name and see if the catch of the promise runs. Here, we can see the error on the console as we have printed the error message in the catch. Let's now use the promise-based version of the file system module. Here, we can see that readFile method of the promises-based file system module returns a promise instead of void. Let's see how we can utilize this method. We know this method returns a promise. So, instead of creating a new promise, we can simply return the same promise. Running the code will give us the same result as we had before. And if we pass an incorrect file name, the catch will receive the error. Let's come to our final code example. We will be using JavaScript's Axios library to fetch news from a RSS link on the BBC website. Axios is a popular JavaScript library used for making HTTP requests, which provides a simple and easy-to-use interface for sending HTTP requests to servers and handling responses. It is a promise-based library which uses JavaScript promises to handle asynchronous operations of requests and responses. Let's try to fetch BBC News feed using Axios. We need to import Axios library using require. Make sure you have installed it using npm install axios. We will call get method of Axios object and pass it news URL. Get method returns a promise. We can call then and catch on this promise object to receive the news or the error responses. When we run the code, we get the entire HTTP message printed on the console. We can find status code and text in the message along with other fields. The actual news data is available in the data field, as you can see here. There are item tags within the data. If we are only interested in the data, we can console news.data and get the list of news only. As we can see that the data is in the XML format. However, it can easily be converted to readable JavaScript objects using some library such as XML2.js, and can be utilized to used as required. Hope you liked the content. Please like, subscribe and hit the bell icon to support our channel. Thanks for being part of our journey.